My mother's voice cut through the dining room like a winter wind, sharp, deliberate. She raised her glass to Ethan. "To our son, the youngest associate director at his firm, we're so proud of you, sweetheart." Her smile was wide, almost performative. She looked at my younger brother, his cheeks flushed with pride. I sat across the table, fork hovering over roasted chicken I hadn't touched, feeling that familiar sting of being invisible. "My name is Harper, I'm 28, a book editor in Boston, Massachusetts. For 5 years I've shaped manuscripts into bestsellers, pouring my heart into stories that move people. But tonight, like so many nights before, my work didn't even warrant a mention." I forced a smile, nodded. While my father chimed in with details about Ethan's new corner office, his words warm, heavy with admiration. "I edited a novel that hit the New York Times bestseller list last month," I said quietly, hoping just for a flicker of acknowledgement. My mother's eyes flicked toward me, lips tightening into that thin line I knew too well. "That's nice, Harper, but let's not take away from Ethan's moment." Nice. The word landed like a pebble in my chest. Small, but heavy, echoing a lifetime of being told I was too much, too ambitious, too outspoken, too inconvenient. The dining room smelled of rosemary and garlic. A cozy New England meal that should have felt like home. But the air was thick with unspoken rules. Ethan, 25, effortlessly charming, sat at the head of the table. The seat I used to claim before he became the golden child. Growing up, I was the one who helped him with his homework. Stayed up late reading him stories when our parents were too busy. But somewhere along the way, he became their pride. I became the shadow. I remember one summer, I must have been 12. They forgot me at a family picnic, too focused on Ethan's Little League game. I sat alone by the lake for hours, watching dragonflies skim the water, feeling that same pebble in my chest ache. The memory hit me now, uninvited, as my mother passed the mashed potatoes to Ethan, her hand lingering on his arm. I gripped my glass of water, condensation cold against my palm, and tried to focus on the clink of silverware, the hum of the radiator, in our old Boston brownstone. I've built a life I'm proud of. My Back Bay apartment is small, but it's mine. Bookshelves sag under the weight of novels I've edited, and the ones I still dream of writing. My days spent in coffee shops, red pen in hand, coaxing stories to life. My nights open mic events, listening to poets spill their souls. Boston's cobblestone streets, the autumn leaves, they make me feel alive. But sitting here, surrounded by family, I'm reminded of how small they make me feel. Last week, I got an email from a publisher, praising my work on a debut novel now in its 3rd printing. I wanted to share it tonight. Wanted to see my father's eyes light up the way they do for Ethan. But I knew better. "Harper's always so busy with her books," my father said, tone kind but distracted, cutting into his chicken. Busy. Another word that meant too much, too intense, too hard to fit into their perfect family narrative. As dessert was served, my mother's famous apple pie, only for special occasions, I felt the weight of a dream creep into my thoughts. In it, I was a kid again, standing in our backyard, watching Ethan open birthday presents while I held a scrapbook I'd made of our adventures. My parents didn't notice me. Didn't see the tears I hid, as I slipped the scrapbook into the trash. I woke up gasping. The betrayal as fresh as if it happened yesterday. Now, watching my mother slice the pie, her hand steady, sure I felt that same ache. Ethan caught my eye across the table. His smile faltered, just for a second. Like he knew something was wrong, but didn't know how to bridge the gap. I looked away, focused on the flickering candlelight, knowing this dinner was just another chapter, in a story where I'd never be the hero. The phone rang as I stood in my kitchen. The scent of brewing coffee filled my small Boston apartment. I glanced at the screen, Mom. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Something told me this wasn't a casual check-in. I pressed accept, held the phone to my ear, the ceramic mug warm in my other hand. "Harper." My mother's voice came through, clipped and cool, like she was reading from a script. "I wanted to let you know about Ethan's wedding. It's next month, October 15th, at that beautiful vineyard in Napa Valley, but, well, we think it's best if you don't come. You're so busy with your editing work, and we don't want to overwhelm you." Busy. That word again. Sharp. Dismissive. Like a door slamming shut. I set the mug down on the counter, my hand trembling slightly. The coffee sloshed, leaving a dark ring on the wood. I'm not too busy for my brother's wedding, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She paused, and I could picture her in her pristine suburban kitchen, adjusting her pearl earrings. Lips pursed. It's just, you know how you can be, Harper. We want Ethan's day to be perfect. How I can be. Too intense, too successful, too much. The words hit like a punch. I sank onto a bar stool, staring at the rain streaking my window. The gray Boston morning mirroring the ache in my chest. Last night I'd woken up, sweating from a dream that felt too real. A memory of me at 10. Hiding in my room while my parents planned Ethan's 5th birthday party. Their voices bright with excitement they never showed for me. In the dream, I found a locked box under their bed, filled with papers I couldn't read, but knew held secrets. The image lingered now, heavy, unsettling. My mother's voice pulled me back. You understand, don't you? She asked. Not really asking. I nodded, though she couldn't see me, my throat too tight to answer. I hung up, the silence in my apartment louder than her words. The betrayal wasn't new, but this time, it cut deeper. Raw. Personal. Like they'd erased me from the family story entirely. I thought of Ethan, his easy smile, the way he used to sneak into my room to hear my stories when we were kids. Did he even know I wasn't invited? I stood, pacing the hardwood floor, my socks catching on a loose nail. My apartment was my sanctuary. Books stacked on every surface. A cozy throw blanket on the couch. The faint hum of the city outside. But right now, it felt like a cage. The dream flashed again. That locked box. Those secrets. What was my family hiding? Why was I always the one pushed aside? The questions swirled, mixing with the hurt until something else sparked. A flicker of defiance. I didn't have to sit here, drowning in this pain. I could write it. I could pour every ounce of this betrayal into a story, a novel that would let me say what I'd never been allowed to say out loud. Not just a book, but a reckoning. Something that could turn their dismissal into my strength. My laptop sat on the dining table, its screen dark but calling to me. I took a deep breath, the coffee's bitter warmth grounding me. And I decided, I'd write a story that would make the world see me, even if my family never would. I sat at the edge of my parents' living room. The familiar scent of lavender candles and polished wood filled the air, but it did nothing to ease the knot in my stomach. It was another Sunday family gathering. The kind Boston families like ours cling to. My mother bustling in the kitchen. My father flipping through the sports section of the Globe. Ethan was there. Sprawled on the couch, laughing about some work anecdote. His voice carried that easy confidence that made everyone lean in. I clutched a glass of iced tea, the cold seeping into my fingers, and I tried to blend into the floral wallpaper. My mother had called this morning, her tone bright but edged. She'd asked me to come as if the conversation about Ethan's wedding had never happened. I came anyway, hoping stupidly, maybe for a sign they'd reconsider, that they'd see me. But as soon as I arrived, my mother's smile faltered. Her eyes darted to Ethan, like I was an uninvited guest. Harper, you're here, she said. Her voice tight, like my presence was a puzzle she didn't want to solve. Ethan glanced at me, his brow creased for a moment. But then he launched into another story, and the room's attention snapped right back to him. I sank deeper into the armchair, my mind spiraling. Writing that novel, pouring my family's betrayal into a story for the world to read, it felt like a fire I could start. But what if it burned too much? Was I doing this to heal, to finally speak my truth? Or was it just revenge, a way to hurt them back? The thought made my chest tighten. A familiar anxiety creeping in, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't take back. I remembered a moment from when I was 13, a school talent show. I'd read a poem I'd spent weeks writing, poured my heart into it. But when I looked out at the audience, my parents were focused on Ethan, who'd won a math award earlier. I'd stood there, voice shaking, feeling like I was shouting into a void. That memory hit me now, vivid and sharp, like a splinter under my skin. I could still hear the auditorium's echo. Smell the dusty stage curtains. See my mother's distracted nod when I asked if she liked my poem. Harper, could you help with the dishes? My mother called from the kitchen, her voice cut through my thoughts. It wasn't a question, more a reminder to stay in my place, useful, but not celebrated. I stood, my legs heavy, caught Ethan's eye again. He opened his mouth maybe to say something but then closed it, looking away as our father clapped him on the shoulder. I sat at the edge of my parents' living room. The familiar scent of lavender candles and polished wood filled the air, but it did nothing to ease the knot in my stomach. It was another Sunday family gathering, the kind Boston families like ours cling to. My mother bustling in the kitchen, my father flipping through the sports section of the Globe. Ethan was there, sprawled on the couch, laughing about some work anecdote. His voice carried that easy confidence that made everyone lean in. I clutched a glass of iced tea, the cold seeping into my fingers, and I tried to blend into the floral wallpaper. My mother had called this morning, her tone bright but edged. She'd asked me to come as if the conversation about Ethan's wedding had never happened. I came anyway, hoping stupidly, maybe for a sign they'd reconsider, that they'd see me. But as soon as I arrived, my mother's smile faltered. Her eyes darted to Ethan, like I was an uninvited guest. Harper, you're here, she said. Her voice tight, like my presence was a puzzle she didn't want to solve. Ethan glanced at me, his brow creased for a moment. But then he launched into another story, and the room's attention snapped right back to him. I sank deeper into the armchair, my mind spiraling. Writing that novel, pouring my family's betrayal into a story for the world to read, it felt like a fire I could start. But what if it burned too much? Was I doing this to heal, to finally speak my truth? Or was it just revenge, a way to hurt them back? The thought made my chest tighten, a familiar anxiety creeping in, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't take back. I remembered a moment from when I was 13, a school talent show. I'd read a poem I'd spent weeks writing, poured my heart into it. But when I looked out at the audience, my parents were focused on Ethan, who'd won a math award earlier. I'd stood there, voice shaking, feeling like I was shouting into a void. That memory hit me now, vivid and sharp, like a splinter under my skin. I could still hear the auditorium's echo. Smell the dusty stage curtains. See my mother's distracted nod when I asked if she liked my poem. Harper, could you help with the dishes? My mother called from the kitchen, her voice cut through my thoughts. It wasn't a question, more a reminder to stay in my place, useful, but not celebrated. I stood, my legs heavy, caught Ethan's eye again. He opened his mouth maybe to say something but then closed it, looking away as our father clapped him on the shoulder. I sat across from Mia in our favorite Boston coffee shop. The kind of place where the air smelled of roasted beans and fresh pastries, and the windows fogged up from the October chill outside. My hands wrapped around a steaming latte, the warmth grounding me, as I spilled everything about the phone call with my mother, about not being invited to Ethan's wedding. Mia, wild curls, glasses perpetually sliding down her nose, listened intently. Her pen tapped against her notebook, a habit from our late-night writing sessions. Her eyes, usually bright with mischief, softened with understanding, as I described that sinking feeling, the way my mother's words had carved out a piece of me. Harper, that's not just unfair, it's cruel, she said, her voice low but firm, like she was stating a fact the world needed to hear. She leaned forward, elbows on the scarred wooden table, and I caught the faint scent of her lavender perfume, a reminder of countless afternoons we'd spent, dreaming up stories together. I'd known Mia since college. We bonded over late-night study sessions and a shared love for dark, twisty novels. She'd always been my safe harbor, the one who saw the parts of me my family ignored. You need to write this, she said, her pen pausing mid-tap. Not just a diary entry, but a novel. Turn that pain into something powerful, something that's yours. I stared at the foam swirling in my latte, my heart racing with both fear and possibility. A memory flickered. Me, at 16, sitting in my childhood bedroom, scribbling stories to escape the sound of my parents praising Ethan downstairs. I'd shown one to Mia back then, a fairy tale, about a sister betrayed by her family, locked away in a tower. She'd loved it, said it felt real. Now, her words pulled me back. Make it like that story, she said, her eyes lighting up. Blend the fairy tale with your truth, betrayal, secrets, all of it. It'll be cathartic. I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the mug. But what if it's too much? What if they read it and hate me more? Mia reached across the table, her hand warm on mine, her silver rings catching the light. I get it. My family cut me off when I published my first book because it was too personal. They didn't speak to me for a year, but writing it saved me. It's not about them, Harper. It's about you. Taking back your voice. Her story hit me hard, a mirror to my own pain, and I felt a spark of courage ignite. The coffee shop hummed around us. Baristas calling orders. The clink of cups. The murmur of students typing. But in that moment, it was just us. Two writers, plotting a rebellion. You're right, I said. My voice shaky, but sure. I'm going to write it. Mia grinned, pushing her glasses up. That's my girl. Make it hurt. Make it beautiful. I left the shop with a fire in my chest, the weight of my family's rejection still there, but now mixed with something new. Purpose. I sat at my desk in my Back Bay apartment. The glow of my laptop screen cast shadows across the stacks of books and half-empty coffee mugs that cluttered my space. The Boston skyline twinkled outside my window. The city's lights quiet reminders of the world moving on, while I stood at the edge of something irreversible. After Mia's words lit a fire in me, I made the decision. I was going to write the novel, a story that would weave my family's betrayal into a fairy tale of secrets and vengeance. I chose a pseudonym, Clara Wren, to shield myself, to keep my family from connecting the dots too soon. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling with a mix of excitement and dread. Like I was about to jump off a cliff. The opening line stared back at me. Some families build cages instead of homes. It felt like a promise, a declaration, that I was done being invisible. I hit save. My heart pounded. I knew there was no turning back. The next few weeks were a blur of late nights and racing thoughts. I'd write until dawn. The hum of my radiator. The distant wail of sirens outside my window, keeping me company. But it wasn't just writing. I was digging, searching for something to anchor the story's heart. I started with old family letters I'd kept in a shoebox under my bed. Their yellowed edges smelled faintly of dust and time. That's when I found it. A cryptic note from my grandmother tucked inside a birthday card from when I was 8. It hinted at a financial scandal my parents had buried. They took everything from us, she'd written in her shaky cursive. My pulse quickened as I read it. Her words stirred a memory, her sad eyes at a Christmas dinner, watching my parents laugh with Ethan, while I sat alone, unnoticed. The scandal, something about a failed business deal and hidden debts, became the thread I wove into my novel, blending it with a fictional kingdom, where a sister betrays another to protect a family secret. Each word felt like a rebellion, exhilarating, but terrifying. Like I was exposing my family's soul, and my own. I posted the first chapter on a Reddit writing forum. My fingers shook as I clicked submit. I didn't expect much. Just a few comments, maybe some feedback from strangers. But within hours, a handful of users upvoted it. One called it hauntingly real. Another said it reminded them of their own family drama. The subtle buzz of attention felt like a spark, a hint of something bigger. And I couldn't help but smile as I refreshed the page, watching the upvotes climb. My phone buzzed with a text from Mia, "Told you it's powerful, keep going." I leaned back in my chair, the city's glow reflecting in my eyes. And I felt a surge of purpose. But beneath it, fear lingered. What if my family found out? What if Ethan read it and saw himself in the villain? I pushed the thought away, focused on the clack of my keyboard. The story poured out faster now, carrying me into a world where, finally, I could be seen. The weeks slipped by in a haze of words and coffee. My Back Bay apartment transformed into a writer's cave, papers scattered across the floor, the faint hum of my laptop fan filling the quiet. I was deep into my novel. Each chapter, a piece of my soul, stitched together with the betrayal I'd carried for years. Writing under my pseudonym Clara Wren felt like slipping into a secret identity. But it wasn't easy. Some nights, the words just wouldn't come. I'd stare at the blinking cursor, doubt creeping in like the chill from my drafty windows. Was this story too raw? Too close to the truth? I'd pace the hardwood floors, the creak under my socks, a rhythm to my racing thoughts, remembering the sting of being left out of Ethan's wedding, the way my mother's voice had sliced through me. But then an email from a beta reader on Reddit, a stranger named Bookworm23 who wrote, "This feels like my life, keep going, Clara." Their words were a lifeline, pulling me back to the keyboard, my fingers flying as I wove the fictional kingdom secrets, with my own family's shadows. Another reader, Story Seeker, messaged, "The sister's betrayal in Chapter 3, is this based on something real?" The question sent a shiver down my spine. The anonymity of the internet suddenly felt too thin, too close to exposure. I'd started to build a small, but fierce, community online. Readers who left comments that made me feel seen in a way my family never had. Their praise fueled me. But the fear of discovery grew heavier. One evening, as I sipped tea in my kitchen, the steam curling like a ghost, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. My heart stopped as I read it. "Hey Harper, heard you're writing something big, sounds intense, can we talk?" His words were hesitant, almost kind. And for a moment, I saw the little boy who used to beg me for bedtime stories, his eyes wide with wonder. I started to type a reply, my thumb hovering. But before I could hit send, another message came through. From my mother. "Harper, what's this about a story? People are talking, don't stir up trouble." Her tone was sharp, her words, like a warning shot. I froze. I pictured her in her pristine kitchen, lips pursed, hands twisting a dish towel, as she spoke to Ethan. The realization hit me. She had intercepted him, shut down whatever bridge he was trying to build. A memory flooded back. Me at 15, overhearing my parents tell Ethan not to mention my writing award at dinner because it might upset the balance. I'd stood in the hallway, clutching my certificate, feeling like I was stealing something, just by existing. The tension was suffocating. But it pushed me deeper into the novel. I wrote through the night. The Boston skyline glittered outside, a stark contrast to the darkness in my story. The anonymous feedback kept coming. Some readers speculating about the real-life parallels in my work. Their comments were both thrilling and terrifying. One wrote, "This feels like a family secret begging to be told." My stomach churned. The scent of chamomile tea turned sour in my mouth. My family hadn't read the book yet, but whispers were spreading. Maybe from a cousin who'd seen my Reddit posts, or a family friend who'd stumbled across the forum. Each notification felt like a step closer to a confrontation I wasn't ready for. And yet every time I faltered, I reread Mia's text from earlier that week. "Your story's going to change everything, don't stop." Her voice, even through a screen, was a steady hand on my shoulder. I leaned back in my chair. The city's hum, a faint heartbeat outside. And I kept writing, knowing I was walking a tightrope between creation and chaos. With allies lifting me up, and enemies waiting for me to fall. The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in my Back Bay apartment. It cast long shadows across the stacks of books, and the crumpled notepads that had become my world. It was late October. The Boston air was sharp with the promise of winter. And I was neck-deep in my novel, each chapter a jagged piece of my heart, laid bare. Under my pseudonym, Clara Wren, I was weaving a story that felt more like an excavation. Unearthing the betrayal I'd carried since childhood. The fictional kingdom I'd created pulsed with my family's secrets. My parents' favoritism. Ethan's stolen spotlight. The financial scandal hinted at in my grandmother's note. Every plot twist mirrored a moment I had lived. Like the scene where the younger sibling betrays the elder to protect a family lie. Writing it felt like peeling back my own skin. Raw, necessary. But the closer I got to the story's heart, the more my nightmares took hold. I'd wake up gasping, sheets tangled. Haunted by a dream where I stood in a courtroom, my family staring, as my novel's pages were read aloud. Exposing their shame. The image lingered now. the scent of chamomile tea turning bitter in my mouth as I typed. The city's distant hum, a faint pulse outside. My online community was growing. A lifeline in the storm. Reddit readers left comments that felt like hugs from strangers. "Clara, this story is tearing me apart in the best way," one wrote. Another, from a user named LitLover88. "The betrayal feels so real. Like you've lived it." Their words kept me going, but they also tightened the knot in my stomach. The novel was spreading. No longer just a quiet Reddit post. A TikTok user, some bookish influencer with a knack for dramatic readings, had stumbled across my first chapter. She posted a video analyzing its haunting family dynamics. It had 1,000 likes by morning, 10,000 by the next day. Each share, a spark in a wildfire I couldn't control. I watched the video on my phone, my thumb frozen over the screen. Hearing my words in her voice. Seeing comments flood in. "Is this based on a true story?" My heart raced. Excitement, yes, but also terror. What if my family saw this? What if Ethan recognized himself in the villain I'd crafted? I leaned back in my chair, the radiator's soft clank grounding me as I stared at my manuscript. A memory hit, sharp and unbidden. Me at 17, sitting in my childhood bedroom. Hearing my mother tell Ethan not to mention my short story publication because it might steal his thunder from a school play. I had clutched my journal, tears blurring the ink. Feeling like I was the family's ghost. Now, that pain fueled every word I wrote. But the fear of exposure was a shadow I couldn't shake. Mia texted me that afternoon. Her message, a burst of light. "Your TikTok numbers are insane. This is it, Harper. You're breaking through." Her encouragement was a tether, pulling me toward the finish line. But my mother's warning from weeks ago echoed in my mind. Her voice cold, "Don't stir up trouble." I could picture her now, lips pursed, hands smoothing her apron as she stood in her kitchen, oblivious to the storm I was brewing. The novel was nearly done. Each chapter, a step closer to a reckoning I both craved and dreaded. And as I typed, the city's lights flickering outside, I knew I was standing at the edge of something that could either free me or break me. The moment I'd both feared and dreamed of hit like a tidal wave. My novel under the pseudonym Clara Wren had exploded overnight. A TikTok influencer with 1 million followers posted a tear-streaked video. She read excerpts from my 3rd chapter, calling it a gut punch of family betrayal that feels too real. By morning, it had 500,000 views. By the next day, 2 million. Comments flooded in. "Who is Clara Wren? This is someone's real story." I sat in my Back Bay apartment. The Boston skyline, a blur of lights through my rain-streaked window. My phone buzzed non-stop with notifications. My heart raced, a mix of exhilaration and panic. I scrolled through Reddit threads, where readers dissected every line, some guessing the kingdom's secrets were ripped from a true family scandal. The air smelled of burnt coffee I'd forgotten on the stove. My hands shook as I clutched my mug, the ceramic cold against my palms. This was what I'd wanted. My story out in the world. But now, it felt like a beast I couldn't control. Then, my phone lit up with a call from Ethan. My stomach dropped. I answered, my voice barely a whisper. "Harper," he said, his tone raw. Not the polished confidence I was used to. "Is this book about us? About me?" I could picture him in his sleek Cambridge apartment. Brow furrowed, hands running through his hair the way he did when he was upset. Before I could respond, he said, "I read it. The brother who takes everything. Who doesn't see his sister's pain, that's me, isn't it?" His voice cracked, and guilt twisted in my chest like a knife. I remembered us as kids, building forts in the backyard. Me promising to protect him. "Ethan, I didn't mean," I started. But he cut me off. "I tried to call you weeks ago. To fix this. To make sure you were at the wedding. Mom stopped me. She said you'd ruin it." The words hit like a slap. A memory surged me at 12, watching Ethan open Christmas presents while my parents ignored the scarf I'd knitted for them, left unwrapped under the tree. I'd thought Ethan didn't care either. But now, his hurt voice suggested otherwise. The call ended abruptly. And within hours, my mother's name flashed on my screen. "Harper, what have you done?" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage, the kind that used to make me shrink as a kid. I could see her in her suburban kitchen, hands gripping the counter, face pale. "People are calling, asking if this is our family. You've humiliated us." I stood, pacing my apartment. The hardwood creaked under my socks. "It's just a story," I lied, my voice shaking. But she wasn't listening. "You've always been so selfish," she said before hanging up. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the city outside. Then my laptop pinged. Another notification. A literary agent, offering representation, calling my novel a viral sensation. But the triumph felt hollow. Ethan's attempt to reach out, blocked by our mother, echoed in my mind. A twist I hadn't seen coming. I sank onto my couch, the throw blanket rough against my skin. I stared at the screen. The weight of my family's anger crashed against the thrill of my story's success. I had wanted to be seen. But now that I was, it felt like standing naked in a storm. Exposed. And alone. The storm of the novel's viral explosion began to settle. And in its wake, I found myself holding something I'd never expected. A publishing deal. An email from a New York literary agent arrived one crisp November morning, offering a contract with a major publisher, calling my work a raw, resonant masterpiece. I sat in my Back Bay apartment, the Boston skyline glowing faintly through my window, the scent of cinnamon from a candle mixing with the chill in the air. My hands trembled as I read the email again. The words blurred through tears I hadn't realized were falling. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as the overlooked sister, but as Harper, the writer who had turned her pain into something powerful. I leaned back in my chair, the creak of the wood grounding me. And I let the moment sink in. This was my victory. My proof that I could rise above my family's dismissal. But the weight of their anger still lingered. A shadow on the edges of my triumph. The days after the viral TikTok video brought more than just a contract. My inbox overflowed with messages from readers. Strangers who'd found my novel online and felt its truth in their bones. One email, from a woman named Sarah in Chicago, read, "Your story made me cry. It's like you wrote my life, being the sibling no one noticed. Thank you for giving us a voice." Another, from a guy in Seattle, said, "I cut ties with my family after reading your book. It showed me I'm not alone." Each message was a thread, weaving a new community around me. People who understood the ache of being unseen. I'd sit at my desk, the radiator humming softly, and read their words, feeling a warmth I hadn't known I was missing. But the isolation hit hard too. My phone stayed quiet. No texts from Ethan after our call. No apologies from my mother. I could still see her face in my mind, pale, furious. Her hands twisting a dish towel, as she accused me of humiliating them. A memory flickered. Me at 14, hiding in my room after my parents skipped my school play to attend Ethan's soccer game. The silence of their absence, louder than any applause. That loneliness echoed now. A reminder that my victory came at a cost. I walked to my favorite coffee shop, the one where Mia and I had plotted this journey. The air was sharp with fallen leaves crunching under my boots. As I sipped my latte, the foam tickling my lip, I thought about how far I'd come. The novel wasn't just a story anymore. It was a bridge to others who'd been hurt. A way to heal. Mia texted me, her words bursting with pride. "You did it, Harper. You're unstoppable." I smiled. But the reflection in the shop's window showed a woman still grappling with the cost of her truth. I had gained a voice, a community, a future. But I'd lost the family I once hoped would see me. The triumph was real. But so was the ache. And as I watched the Boston streets bustle outside, I felt myself growing into someone new. Someone who could carry both the victory and the scars. Back in my Back Bay apartment, the glow of Boston's skyline felt different now. Less like a distant dream, and more like a quiet anchor. The viral storm of my novel had settled, leaving me with a publishing deal and a new sense of purpose. but also a deafening silence from my family. My phone, once buzzing with their calls and texts, sat quiet on my desk. The screen dark, except for notifications from readers, and from my agent. I had expected anger after the novel's explosion. But this emptiness, Ethan's silence, my mother's refusal to call, my father's absence was heavier than I'd imagined. I stood by my window, the November air seeping through the frame, carrying the faint smell of wet leaves and city smoke. I traced the condensation on the glass, my finger cold. And I felt a resolve harden inside me. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I'd written my truth as Clara Wren, and now I'd promote it, no matter the cost. But the thought brought a flicker of doubt. A memory of me at 16, sitting alone at a family barbecue, watching my parents laugh with Ethan while I ate my hot dog in the shade. Invisible. That loneliness clung to me now. A reminder of what I risked by pushing forward. The online world wasn't all kind either. While most readers sent messages of support, a few comments stung. Hate from accounts I suspected were tied to family, friends, or distant cousins. One, under a username like Boston Patriot 22, wrote, "Clara Wren's just a bitter liar airing dirty laundry, shame on her." I could almost hear my mother's voice in those words. Her lips pursed, her sharp glare. Standing in her kitchen, rallying her allies. My hands shook as I read it. The coffee I'd been sipping turned sour in my throat. But Mia's voice broke through. Her text lighting up my phone. "Ignore the haters, Harper. Your story's bigger than them." I pictured her in her cluttered apartment, her curls bouncing as she typed. And it steadied me. I started scheduling interviews, posting snippets on social media. Each step, a defiance of the silence and the hate. The city hummed outside, a steady pulse of life. And I felt myself moving forward. Not back to the Harper who shrank for her family, but toward someone new. Someone who could carry the weight of their rejection and still stand tall. I sat under the bright lights of a small Boston studio, the air thick with the scent of fresh paint and coffee. My hands clasped tightly in my lap, trying to hide their trembling. The interviewer, a woman with kind eyes and a clipboard, leaned forward. Her voice warm, but probing. "Clara Wren, your novel's taken the world by storm, but people are saying it's more than fiction, it's your family's story. Can you speak to that?" My throat tightened. The weight of the question pulled me back to every moment I'd felt invisible. Family dinners, where my parents praised Ethan. The wedding I wasn't invited to. The silence that followed my book's viral explosion. The studio's hum cameras whirring, the soft rustle of the crew faded. All I could see was my mother's face, lips pursed in anger. And Ethan's voice, cracked with hurt, during our last call. This was it. The moment I dreaded and craved to tell my truth. Not just as Clara Wren, but as Harper, the sister who'd been pushed aside. I took a deep breath. The microphone clipped to my sweater felt like a lifeline. "The novel is fiction," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "But it's rooted in my experience. I grew up feeling like my family didn't see me, like my story didn't matter. Writing this was my way of finding my voice." The words felt like a release, like opening a window in a stuffy room. I remembered being 15, sitting in my childhood bedroom, writing stories in a notebook I hid under my mattress because my parents called them a distraction from Ethan's achievements. That girl was still in me. But now she was standing taller. Her words reaching millions. The interviewer nodded, her pen paused, her eyes soft with understanding. And I felt a spark of connection. A reminder of the readers who'd emailed me sharing their own stories of family betrayal. My family's silence remained. A heavy void. I hadn't heard from Ethan since his call. And my mother's last words, "You've humiliated us," echoed in my mind. I could still see her in her kitchen, hands twisting a dish towel, her face pale with fury. But in that studio, surrounded by the quiet buzz of the crew and the weight of my own words, I felt something shift. I wasn't just the overlooked sister anymore. I was Harper, the writer who'd built a community with strangers, who now felt like family. Readers' messages flooded my inbox daily, their stories of healing mirroring my own. And that bond was stronger than the one I'd lost. As I left the studio, the Boston streets glittering with early holiday lights, I felt a quiet strength settle in my chest. I had faced the rift, owned my choices, and found healing in authenticity. The pain of my family's distance lingered, but so did the light of my new beginning. And for the first time, I knew I could carry both. I stood on my Back Bay apartment's tiny balcony, the December air sharp against my cheeks, carrying the scent of snow and the faint jingle of holiday bells from the Boston streets below. My novel, now a bestseller under Clara Wren, had changed everything. It wasn't just a book anymore. It was a movement. Millions of readers were sharing their own stories of family betrayal. In comments, in emails, in tearful DMs. I leaned against the icy railing, my scarf fluttering in the wind. And I felt the weight of what I'd gained. A voice. A community. A life built on my own terms. But the cost lingered, heavy as the snow clouds above. My family's silence was absolute. Ethan hadn't texted since our fight. And my mother's last words accusing me of humiliation still echoed. I could picture her in her kitchen, hands clenched around a coffee mug, her face set in that familiar mix of anger and disappointment. A memory crept in. Me at 10, sitting alone at a family picnic, watching my parents cheer for Ethan's relay race, while my homemade lemonade sat untouched. That girl, desperate for their love, was still inside me. But now, she held a pen. Not a plea. The lesson wasn't what I had expected. I thought writing the novel would be revenge. A way to make them see me. But it became something deeper, self-healing. By choosing my truth over their approval, I had found empowerment. A strength I hadn't known I had. My phone buzzed with a message from Mia. "Your book's changing lives, Harper, don't forget that." I smiled, picturing her grin, her curls bouncing as she typed. The isolation from my family stung. But the community I had built, readers who saw themselves in my story, filled that void with a warmth I had never known. I thought of Sarah, from Chicago. Her email about her overlooked childhood had led to weekly chats. Or the guy from Seattle, who started his own blog about family trauma. Their stories were my elixir. Proof that betrayal could spark something beautiful. I stepped back inside. The radiators hum, a soft comfort. I sat at my desk, where my laptop glowed with a new email. An invitation to speak at a literary festival. I knew exactly what I'd say. To anyone listening. Anyone who's ever felt invisible. Share your story. It doesn't have to be a novel. Just a sentence. A truth. Your voice matters. As I typed a reply, I wondered about my family. Would Ethan ever reach out? Would my mother ever soften? The ambiguity hurt. But it didn't define me anymore. I looked out at the city, its lights twinkling like stars. And I felt a quiet peace. The cost of my truth was real. But so was the freedom. And as I closed my laptop, the weight of their silence felt lighter. Carried away by the community I had found. And the story I had dared to tell.